Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So, in this video we will be playing our friend Anthon2010. So if you didn't see the last video, um, it was a very competitive game, and this is another one of those games that are very interesting as well. So the game starts out in what is called a perk defense, or purk, however you pronounce it. There are many ways to play it: e4, d6, d4, knight f6, and here I select the move knight to c6, just simply going out of theory. I could also play e5, I could also play g6. There are many ways to play it, but I play knight c6, and here I provoke our friend Anthon to play d5, because now I have knight to e5, and going for the bishop. After f4, well, knight takes d3, and after queen takes d3, my goal is to play c6 and maybe e6 and try to free up the center a little bit. That's my goal. But in the game, I said, you know what, if you play c3, I'm going to play g6. I'm going to make my setup very stable looking. So after bishop to e3, I sort of annoyed the bishop a little bit. I said, let's play knight g4. Let's have some fun. Bishop defends knight. And after bishop to d2, I play e5. After d5, I play knight to e7. h3, knight f6. Knight f3, bishop to g7. Castles, castles, knight to a3, and now c6. I'm doing what I said in the game by ripping open this sort of weird looking structure, right? I want to get it out. So after c4, I'm like, okay, well, you really want to keep the stronghold there, so I'm going to play knight to d7. I'm going to prepare f5, but at the same time reroute my knight to c5 and go for this weird looking structure. So after knight to c2, but now I have knight to c5, right? I could also play f5 as well and sort of expand, but I chose knight to c5. Queen to e2, and now at the same time I could have chose f5 again. f5 was probably the most desirable move, right? Because f5, e takes f5 would lead to g takes f5, and the idea of e4 is somewhat unstoppable because the bishop doesn't have anywhere to retreat to, and if the knight retreats, well then e4 is still going to happen, and this bishop, frankly, is dead. So I should have done that, but instead I played knight takes d3. This is sort of inaccurate in terms of move order, like I said, and I guess I don't think I made the best decision, because to be honest, when we're looking at this position, the knight is much better than this bishop. The bishop, it's being blocked off by all its pawns. This knight is doing a very active role in terms of attacking the bishop, looking towards the center, maybe playing knight to a4. The knight is very active compared to the bishop. So what I should have done is f5. I fell victim to one of my own sins of decision making, right? I traded with a piece that just wasn't as active as mine, didn't have as much potential as mine. So I broke one of my own rules. So that is something for me to improve on. Knight takes d3, queen takes d3, f5, and now e takes f5. And all of a sudden, the bishop gets to come out. It attacks the knight here. Queen to b3, c takes, e takes, and now bishop to e4. I'm just saying, maybe I want to capture on f3, maybe I want to capture on d5, and if you play knight to e3, I'm going to play bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and I'm going to get the rook down to f3, because I really want to take advantage of this very bad looking pawn structure. After king to g2, what I should have done is I should have played the move e4 here, because simply because I have queen to d7, I can pressure our opponent Anthon's king, but I didn't. I decided to play rook to f7. I remember I had to focus on another game at this time, and so I didn't make the best move here. But after rook a to c1, I played knight to f5, and all of a sudden, I kind of felt like, if I traded and put the knight on f5, it would be good. But I put the knight on f5, and all of a sudden, after knight takes, it's like, I have an attack here, but it doesn't feel very strong. So what I should have done is I should have played bishop to h6, pinned the bishop, right? And then played something like bishop to f4 and sort of keep this structure, because getting the queen to g5 is a very important part of it. But at the same time, I don't want to trade pieces here. Like if I got the knight to f4, then that would be really good. So in essence, I traded another one of my pieces that was in reality much better than it looked right now. So I played knight to f5, a mistake. After knight takes f5, g takes, rook to c2, doubling on the c file, creating some activity. And here I played king to h8. In total honesty, my plan was queen to h4, rook to g8, and bishop to h6. I wanted to do that, but after rook f to c1, I was scared at the possibility of rook to c7 later on, right? So I was thinking, you know what, if queen to h4, there might be even rook to c8 here. So I was a little bit scared. I went with bishop to f6, king to h2, and now e4. I said, I'm going to open up my bishop to e5, but bishop f4 happened. I thought that was a really good move from Anton. So I played rook to g7, saying, maybe I'm going to double up on the g file. And after queen to b4, however, I got my opportunity. Bishop to e5, and after bishop takes e5, d takes e5, queen to c3 happened. And after queen to c3, I had a few options. Now that I look at it, my best option is probably to take the pawn on d5 and set up for maybe an e3 and down on the g2 square. However, I didn't see that in the game. I was focused on this open g file, so I played the move queen to g5. And after queen to g3, I was looking for a very easy way to simplify. So after queen takes c1, just saying, if rook takes, I'm going to take here, right? So after queen takes g7, there's king takes g7, right? But I want to ask you something. Why does the engine say rook takes c1 over queen takes g7? Now, what difference does it make, right? Rook takes c1, rook takes g3, and some piece takes g3, and it's the same material situation as queen takes g7, king takes g7, rook takes c1. What is the difference here? Well, the difference here is that, number one, if the rook takes here, the rook takes on g3, and king takes on g3, white gets an extra move in moving the king to g3, and this king is still on h8. However, if we look at the queen takes g7 situation that happened in the game, the black king gets one step closer. So in one of the scenarios, this king gets one step closer, and in one of the scenarios, the black king gets one step closer. So rook takes c1 was the preferred way of doing it because it gave white an option to advance. But instead this happened in the game. So after rook to d8, rook to c7, we're both playing very actively in the rook endgame. Here I have rook d2. After rook to a6, I bring my king up, king to g3, f4, and here's what decided the game. e3, rook takes f2, king to f5, and After rook to b2, I'm going to play check and e2. b5, check and e2, and queen, king to e4, queen to g3, checkmate. So what did we learn in this game? Well, the opening was perfectly fine, right? e5, d5. This was all normal. Nothing much here. c4. Now I would feel like the first misstep, it was not obvious, but it had to be knight to c2, simply because, you know, it was good in the sense of relocating the knight and maybe playing b4, but at the same time, it's sort of like Anthon knew what he was doing and knew what White wanted to do, but sort of forgot about Black's plan a little bit. And so the important thing is that a good player is able to execute his own plan, but also consider the threats of the opponent's plan and sort of react to it accordingly. And so after knight to c5, I made a mistake here in trading my good knight for the bad bishop. If you want to know why I say that's a bad bishop, you can refer to sometime earlier in the video. But before playing takes d3, I should have played the move f5 here. You'll see what I mean when you scroll back, or if you've seen the video already, you know what I mean. And after knight takes d3, f5, bishop takes, and I get this weakness on d5, but I also get this doubled pawn that I can attack on f3. Should have played e4 here. Here I made another mistake in trading what was to be a very good knight, so I could have rerouted this knight to f4, and this knight would have been very powerful. But instead I traded it, and it just made my life more difficult. I mean, Anthon played the second half of this game very well, just finding the defensive moves that were needed, right? But maybe queen to c3 wasn't the right way to go. Maybe something like queen to d2, preventing this g5, but at the same time defending the d pawn. So that's one thing. And queen takes d5 probably should have been my choice here, but I didn't see that too much. And here, remember, rook takes c1 and queen takes g7. There's a difference between those two moves. If you don't remember the difference, then just scroll back a little bit in the video to watch the moment where I explain it. And in this rook endgame, I mean, it was competitive and we were all active, but it seemed like my threats were more straightforward. I was able to find the right moves, find the queening process easier, and checkmate our friend Anthon. So, when in doubt, have fun, explore things, explore new openings, learn what you can, do your tactics, have fun, explore your curiosity. I am sounding like a really weird looking motivational speaker, but it's all about you. So, go out there, and I'll see you next time.